Hello and welcome. It's Steve, and I'm here with attorney Ron Berutti. Hi, Ron.
Hi, Steve. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
You are welcome, and thanks for joining us. Ron is a freedom fighter. Ron is a notable attorney taking a stand against the medical tyranny that we're finding in all our communities. And there's a man behind the lawyer. He's a good lawyer. He's a brave lawyer, but we're going to find out a little bit about what makes him brave. He is, like everybody else, just a person. And yet he's a person who's decided to say, enough. This is enough. So, Ron, let me start by asking, who are you up against here? Who are your opponents? And where are you taking the battle and why?
It's a great question. And just as to preface, my firm started January 1st, 2022. My partner, Gwyneth Murray Nolan, and I left our positions as equity partners in a sizable law firm in New Jersey. And we left our comfortable positions because this is the kind of work we wanted to handle. And we felt that we were not going to be able to handle it in a way that would be in our clients' best interests at that firm. So this was our best opportunity, and we took a real gamble coming out to handle what we call liberty cases. My opponents, to answer your question, are so far have been the first big case we started was I sued Mayor de Blasio in New York under the vaccine mandate for restaurants and gyms, a case that's still kicking around. My partner Gwyneth was the lead plaintiff in the suit against Governor Murphy with respect to masking. She couldn't represent herself in that case. That was with our old firm. There were issues about conflict there. But also we take on school boards, numerous of them, with respect to their attacks on parental rights and their actions that are inimical to the best interests of children, we believe, in many cases. We've taken on the mayor of a local town who we believe has acted in a tyrannical way to punish somebody who is associated with our client because our client is not of his to his political liking. We've done a critical race theory case. We've taken on in the Mountain Lakes, New Jersey school district for some of their programming and curricula, which plainly, in my view, violates the Constitution. And so every day we're taking on something new. We have calls, really a lot of calls from people who have nowhere else to turn. They're being terminated from jobs for not being vaccinated. They're having issues with the school board or the school system doing things to damage and harm their children. And the calls it's been an amazing stretch, an amazing 15, 16 months, because the calls keep coming and we keep finding that people have needs and no one wants to handle these cases except us. And we handle them with vigor.
I applaud your efforts. And so that begs the question, there are many, many attorneys across the country. There are many attorneys in New Jersey. And you know many, I know many. And so many of these attorneys really go along to get along. They have refused to take a stand. They have refused to take on these types of clients. Why you? Have you figured out, like, is this a destiny type of thing? Has your life been leading to this point? Have you
Yeah.
just said enough is enough, or why are you taking a stand now?
Uh, I mean, this could be a long answer. It could be a short answer. I'll give you the sort of semi-long answer. My political awakening came on Labor Day of 1980. My dad took us to see a speech of a candidate for president of the United States who was going to start his general election campaign, named Ronald Reagan. And it was at he came and spoke at Liberty State Park in New Jersey with the Statue of Liberty behind him. And I didn't really have I knew things were going wrong. I was a newspaper boy. I used to read the newspaper. I knew things were going wrong, but I didn't have a sense of kind of, what really was the cause of things. I knew the hostage crisis, et cetera, and knew the economy was bad. And then I saw Ronald Reagan say, recessions when your next door neighbor loses his job, depressions when you lose your job, and recoveries when Jimmy Carter loses his job. And it just all clicked in.
Yeah.
And my sort of my progression, sort of my philosophical progression started that day. And I began to take a great interest in the Constitution, and but the Declaration of Independence, actually, in really during the Tea Party movement. I started to really focus on it and understand it better, and I started to read it, and I did a lot of reading about, how other people throughout the United States and world history looked at the Declaration of Independence. And I would give lectures or presentations on the 4th of July at a community association where I get 60 to 80 people, and we'd have a discussion. And I would not only talk about the Declaration of Independence, we read it, but also talk about, what did Frederick Douglass say about it? What did Abraham Lincoln say about it? What did Elizabeth Cady Stanton say about it? What did Martin Luther King say about it? What did Ho Chi Minh say about it? And what did Václav Havel say about it? And we would, so we would, there's the bottom line is that the Declaration of Independence, it defines freedom. And what freedom is being able to live as a human being in your human nature, speak freely, think freely, worship, don't worship, worship what you want, don't worship what you're told, defend yourself, defend your family, try to do better. These are the things that every single human being has innately as a member of the human race, that these are our human animal characteristics, so to speak. It's our nature. And our rights come from nature. Our rights are our human nature. We're human beings, nobody can take that away from us. But government through history always has tried. And in our great experiment of the United States, the founding fathers, even though imperfectly, they understood this essential element of humanity and what freedom was. And it was hard fought for decades, and still today there's hard fought efforts to preserve freedom and to expand freedom. Certainly the Civil War was an incredible conflagration related to freedom. I have Abraham Lincoln in my background here as a hero of mine personally. But my real hero in life was my grandfather. My grandfather in 1948 escaped communism. He lived on an island in what was then Yugoslavia. And at one point he escaped capture from the Nazis who occupied his island. And they took he was not Jewish, but they took all the able-bodied men to work camps. He escaped. He outsmarted the SS, actually. He refused to join a communist party. They took away his livelihood. Then they said they were going to take away his home when he went to vote, and he was the only one to vote. Everyone had to vote. Took him by gunpoint to vote. He didn't want to vote. And he put the ballot in the box for other, so the communist or other. And the story was you could hear the thunk in the ballot box. Incredibly brave man. Some would say stupid. I say brave. And then he figured out they told him he was going to be homeless within a year. And he figured out a way to escape across the sea in a 10 horsepower boat. And I realized, that all these great things that I have, I've been born into this free country. And it's all because of the risks that he took to be free. And he used to tell me, Ronald, you don't know what freedom is until you've lost it. And we've reached a point in our society where, all the things that President Reagan talked about and all the things that were in the Declaration of Independence, the things that mattered to Frederick Douglass and the things that mattered to Martin Luther King and everyone in between, they're all in jeopardy and at risk. And I don't want to ever, with the opportunity that I have as an attorney in a free country, I don't want my grandfather's legacy to be lost on my watch, not without me going down swinging. And I want to try to honor my grandfather's legacy, and I want to try to preserve for my future grandchildren the free nation that I inherited because of the struggles of so many before us.
That's a wonderful story. And so you have a legacy of fighting for freedom from your family. And so it's the kind of thing, it sounds like, where you enter a courtroom on a daily basis, not wanting to let your grandfather down. Does that sound about right?
It's sort of, I didn't become a lawyer to honor my grandfather. I became a lawyer because I was interested. I majored in hotel restaurant management, by the way. Go figure, back in 1988 at University of Massachusetts, I graduated one of the few schools that did that. And I went 4 years. I thought I was going to own a restaurant. My grandfather actually was a great chef, a great pastry chef, outstanding pastry chef. And, but it was sort of a family business. I worked in restaurants, but as during that time period was also, the Reagan Revolution. And I took a great interest in politics and debating and writing. And I saw other kids go to law school, and I didn't even know what law school was. I had no idea. And I said, "What's law school?" And they said, "Well, what's the SAT? What's the LSAT to go? That's how you get into law school. What's law school? Well, you go to law school to be a lawyer. Tell me about it." And I saw if these knuckleheads can do it, I could certainly do it. So that's how it happened. And here I am, 30 years later practicing. But I did a lot of business litigation, commercial litigation. I've been blessed to have mentors and people who gave me the opportunity to handle really significant work, fraud cases. And because of that, I realized I had a talent for complexity and breaking down complex things. And suddenly the case, the vaccine case with Mayor de Blasio fell into my lap because of a good friend of mine, and didn't fall into my lap. I earned the case, but the opportunity arose, and to me, it was really everything I could want. It was right down the alleyway of the things that I believe in and the things that I stand for, and now it's probably 75% of the work I do is this kind of work, and I can't wait to get up every morning to come to work.
Bravo. So I take it that the medical freedom cases typically are on the complex side, and that's one of the allures of them.
Yeah, well, the medical freedom cases, the vaccine cases in particular, we are heavy science based in our positioning. The vaccines themselves are all emergency use authorized by the FDA. None of them are actually fully approved, despite what people will tell you. There are 2 fully approved vaccines, neither of which is manufactured in the United States. They're generally unavailable. So what we're doing is they've been pushing from the start this experimental vaccines, and we also have the original study reports that we include in virtually every one of our vaccine complaints, and we have several. We just sued Governor Murphy. We're probably going to be suing another governor near you very soon. We've sued Mayor de Blasio, now Mayor Adams, and then others. BlackRock we're suing, quite a few private entities, National Dance Institute. We have the studies from Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson that were published and that the FDA relied upon. And we've developed relationships with incredibly brilliant experts in the medical field, in the pharmacological immunization field, who really guided us through the science. And these things never worked. They knew they didn't work from the start. In the case of Pfizer, in their study, and this is in optimal conditions pre-variant, by our math, 0.73% of the people participating in the study who got vaccinated received the benefit from the vaccine, 0.73. Now, they would say it's 95% effective. That number, we know how they got to that number, and it's really a pretty meaningless number. The 0.73 is the real number, and something like 138 people had to be vaccinated to benefit one person. Moderna was something, I think, 1.15%, and Johnson & Johnson, you could calculate different ways, but I think it was somewhere around 1.65%. So none of them were over 2% effective, even 2% effective ever. And yet here we are, we've had millions and millions of these things pushed on us and pushed on people. And one statistic I haven't seen yet is how many people lost jobs for refusing to take this what I call poison. I'm sure the number's in the millions. It's absolutely horrific to see this happening in our country. And what it's about power and money. and it's really careless with respect to the thing that government's supposed to care about, which is keeping us free.
100%. So let me ask you, with these lawsuits, what is the objective? Is it really just to um, get the mayor, for instance, to roll back the mandate, or is it to take another step and assert a little bit of a punishment so that to get compensation for damages? Is it to teach them a lesson so that they'll never make a mandate again? How far do you go?
You touch on three different things that are all part of what we do, but the big picture is as follows. See, we believe that the way the country has gone and where we are, our society is so divided. And we see today's the day that President Trump is being arraigned in New York City. And it's banana republic stuff. And our country is so divided and we are in such bad shape that it's hard to just expect people to understand or not take a hard position one way or the other. But we see that there are only two ways to fix things in this country and to preserve freedom. And one is the election process. And we're starting to do some election law too, because we think we want to take the cases that no one will take that are important. And we think election law is important and the problems with election law. But especially we're taking work from insurgent candidates because they don't really have anybody to represent them. They're just marginalized. But we know elections have problems. And I think that if, anyone is really honest with themselves and will honestly look at the evidence, will know that there are problems with our elections. And the other way is the court system. Now, we have had the benefit. Just a little backstory. I wasn't a Donald Trump supporter when he ran for president. He was not my preferred candidate as a Republican nominee. In fact, I didn't trust him at all. And but he did say one thing, that when he got nominated, a lot of people I knew didn't want to support him. And my feeling was that the only reason I'm going to support him is because Justice Scalia had passed away and President Trump had pledged, and he put out a list of people who he would look at for potential Supreme Court appointment. And they were considered to be constitutionalists, people who were originalists, who believed that the Constitution is something that is essentially a contract. It is something that is to be read and applied as written to whatever the situations may be, and that it's not some kind of changing whatever you want it to be document, because I'll quote Mark Levin, a living constitution is a dead constitution. If it can change to whatever you want it to be, then it's dead. It's not even a constitution. It's just a joke. So Justice Scalia was a one of my heroes. My hero certainly on the bench. I had the pleasure of seeing him speak up a couple of times. And he had passed away, and he was going to be replaced. And either Hillary Clinton was going to replace him with somebody who would have rubber stamped every single one of her executive orders, and therefore it would have been government by fiat with no checks or balances from the court, or it would be Donald Trump, who at least pledged to appoint somebody who was a constitutionalist. To my great surprise and my great happiness, probably the greatest legacy to me of President Trump was his judicial appointments. He really remade the courts, the appeals courts and the Supreme Court. His 3 appointments to the Supreme Court, maybe they're not perfect, but they are generally constitutionalists. They, when you have a legal case, you shouldn't expect the court to come down one way or the other. Unfortunately, people think, you're right or you're left. The 3 justices who President Trump appointed have not always been on the same side. They've gone different ways, and that's okay. But we believe we have an opportunity to get some of these cases before the Supreme Court. We have a shots on goal theory. We now have 6 justices, we think, who will, on any given day, might go with one of our arguments. Maybe 4, maybe 3, maybe 5, and maybe none. But we think we got 3 justices who get it the way we get it. We think there are three somewhere in the middle, and we think there are three who will never get it. And we have a shot, and we have a shots on goal theory. We keep taking these cases. We keep presenting the arguments. We keep presenting that argument about Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson and Johnson. And the more shots on goal we take, the more likely it is we're going to score. We're going to get one of these cases up to the Supreme Court, or we'll get a good decision in one of the appellate courts. President Trump also appointed a ton of Court of Appeals judges, also, hopefully constitutionalists, originalists. We think that if we can get one or two of these cases, one or two of these issues before the Supreme Court, get a good positive court ruling from maybe the Second or Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Second Circuit covers New York, Third Circuit covers New Jersey. Maybe we can really change some aspect of law or some aspects of law in a way that will have permanent and lasting effects across the United States to preserve liberty. And that's what we're aiming for.
So given your emphasis on the importance of the Constitution, do you see this essentially as a battle between people who want to keep this a constitutional republic and people who don't?
Yeah, absolutely. The great thing, I talk about originalism, and it's a little bit esoteric, but the originalist philosophy is, to me, the absolute proper way to look at the Constitution. When the Constitution is created, when it was created, or amendments are passed and made applicable, they have a meaning. They're there for a reason, and you have to look at the time what was intended when it was passed. It's not to become some kind of open ticket to do whatever you want. You can't just run any, as Scalia once said, you can't just run any old statute up a flagpole and say it's constitutional. There is a meaning to the Constitution, and that sets the limits of government. The limits of government. Government is to be limited. The Constitution is what the people gave to this new federal government and said, this is what you have the right to do. This is what we're giving you, and this only. And what's happened is, and especially it started really during the New Deal era more than anything else, the case known as Wickard versus Filburn, the Constitution has become a vehicle for any and all things that people want it to be. And it's usually things that are socialist in nature, et cetera. And they fly in the face of what the Constitution says, what the intent was of the Constitution. And it just gets progressively, and I'll use that word ironically, worse. What there is the originalists want a Constitution. Progressives don't want a Constitution. They want to have a government that suits what they want to pass without limits. There's no limit on if you ask a progressive attorney, what's the government, what's the limit of what government can do? I've asked this question many times. I've never gotten an answer. There is no limit to what government can do, pretty much, in terms of passing statutes in their view. And that means that they don't really care, in my view, they don't really care about the Constitution at all. They just care about their politics. And that's not what lawyers are supposed to do.
You mentioned the inspiration you draw from your grandfather. You mentioned the true love you have of the legal work. You mentioned the importance to you of the Constitution to this country. But I will ask, when it's 12 midnight and you've had an 18-hour day and you may be at your lowest point, do you have any other sources of strength that you call upon to basically say, all right, let's go another round? Do any books, any leaders, any talks? Who inspires you?
Well, I'm married to my partner, so so we there are times at 3 a.m. we'll wake up and we'll go, wait a minute, what about this? But look, the sources that inspire me, first of all, is family, right? I mean, I want my children. I got 3 children of my own, and I'm raising two stepchildren now, and I want them to live in a free country, and I want them to have the benefit of of all the freedoms that I've had and that my grandfather had, and that's the number one inspiration. I want people to live in a free society. There's nothing left after this. Last best hope on earth. Where do you go from there? How do I get into a 10 horsepower boat, and where do I go? Like my grandfather did. There's nowhere else to go. So we have to preserve it here, or we lose it forever everywhere. And so I do take inspiration from people who are liberty minded. I think Mark Levin is a incredible person to listen to. His incredible knowledge. I've learned so much. I learned more from him probably than I learned in law school. Just listening to him and processing what he says, and just makes so much sense. He's somebody, but really, in particular, I looked at history. I looked at Abraham Lincoln. I know a lot about Abraham Lincoln, a lot more than most people should ever know about Abraham Lincoln. I know. I read a lot about him, and the weight that he had on his shoulders to preserve freedom. Can I give you a quick little bit of Abraham Lincoln?
Please.
So if you look at the Gettysburg Address, very important. I wouldn't say his greatest speech. He's had other better speeches, but it's a great speech. But he talks about preserving this country. And what a lot of people don't realize is that at the time of the Gettysburg Address, we were still the only country in the world that elected its leaders. That the world looked at the United States and laughed and said, human beings can never be responsible enough to manage their own affairs the way the United States thinks they can do it, or the Americas at the time. And Abraham Lincoln said, no, this is the way. He was inspired by the Declaration of Independence. And so with the Gettysburg Address, he talked about that. He talked about what a lot of people don't see in the Gettysburg Address is that the world was watching, and the world was laughing. And he said, here you are. If you are unhappy with your election, you can just go off and run away. And it just goes to show that it's an unworkable situation. And Lincoln said, no, it's not unworkable. And this has to last. We have to preserve this. And he was a man who had probably more weight on his shoulders than any other person in history, who was not a religious icon, I'd say. And he was very alone. And he knew this burden that he was carrying mattered to the ages. And but for what happened, there would be no democracy or republic probably today that works. There would be no place for people to escape to. There would be no discussion about a constitution and the preservation of individual rights. So I've taken great inspiration in my life from the things that Abraham Lincoln did, and the things that other people like him have done, like my grandfather, to be free.
Yeah. So one last question. Have you been able to persuade people who maybe progressives, maybe not progressives, but people who want to put their head in the sand, people who don't want to bother? Have you been able to persuade anybody about the importance of saying no to medical tyranny? And if so, how were you able to persuade them? What won them over?
Well, again, I think that we're in a situation where people are very dug in, right? But whether I persuaded them or not, I mean, I used to have a huge following on LinkedIn when I first started my case, and I got an international following. I'd have 60,000 people read each of my posts and hundreds of comments and shares, and then they kicked me off the platform because I was too honest. And I try to be very, I hope I don't come across as being a whack job. I try to be very thoughtful about the things I say and I do. I try to speak like an adult, like I'm speaking to adults. And that's how I operate, and that's how when I write things, I don't just write crazy stuff. And now I'm on Facebook too, and I have my things. What's interesting, I don't know if I really persuade anybody per se, but you do see, and what you're seeing, I think, in general, is that those of us who do speak up, you have to have some sense of bravery, and you have to have really a lack of fear of the criticism you're going to get. You're going to get a lot of criticism, you know. In this day and age, if you disagree with somebody, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a misogynist, you're a transphobe, you're a this, you're a that. And you know what that is? That's their fear talking. That is their fear, because they don't have anything else to say to you. They cannot speak to you logically. They have to call you a name. You know, sticks and stones, really. It's a sticks and stones thing. And you can't let it hurt you. You have to go on and have thick skin, and you can't be worried about what people are going to think of you. Because if you do, they're going to win. So what I told people when I first took the de Blasio case, when I first was pitching for the case, I said, look, right now, it was September 2021, you know, COVID was hot. The vaccines were going to be the cure-all for everything. And what I said is, look, I said, right now, the world will think we're crazy. They're not going to believe us. We're not likely to win in the lower court, at least early on, because we're the crazies. You know, they don't want to analyze things. We're just the crazy people. We're the anti-vax people. And by the way, there are many, many, many people I know, myself included, who've gotten vaccines all their lives, but these are not vaccines. These are something else. And scientifically, they're very different than the vaccines we've had in the past. But I said, as I believe in my heart, as time goes on, we're going to see that these vaccines are not what they're advertised to be. And we're going to see people probably getting sick from them. And we're going to see that people are going to start changing their opinion, because they're going to have to. So I don't know if I persuade anybody, but I don't have the fear of speaking what I see as being the truth. Because at the end of the day, I have to believe that the truth will prevail. Because if I don't believe that, then what do I believe in? And I think that if I can inspire anybody, it's speak the truth, speak it civilly, speak it intelligently, and stick with the truth. And by all means, have discussions with people, offer people the opportunity to have a civil discussion with you. Don't be afraid to take the slings and arrows that are going to come at you. But if you pursue the truth, ultimately the truth will prevail. If you don't pursue the truth, if we don't pursue the truth, if we don't all perceive the truth, we don't all proceed and try to preserve the truth, then what's going to happen is we're going to live in fiction. We're going to live in 1984. You know, and we're really perilously close to that in a lot of ways. And like I said, not on my watch if I can help it.
Amen to that. If we don't have the truth, we have nothing. Ron, it's been wonderful speaking with you. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your encouragement. I want to thank you for your inspiration. And I wish you many blessings and many victories in the courtrooms to come.
Thank you, Steve. You. Keep doing what you're doing. Really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You too.
Just stay with us for a quick second.